Thank you very much for coming here today. As you know, in July of 2011, the City of Kamloops released a letter asking, providing a letter with several questions regarding the Ajax project. And when I visited Mayor and Council in March of 26, I made a commitment to Mayor and Council and also the community that we would be open and transparent, and that we will, and I promise to try to find as many answers as possible with respect to this letter. So today, the letter will be released as part of City Council's weekly agenda and will be made public. It's now posted on KGHM or on the Ajax Mine.ca website, and we also provided you with a copy in advance last night. So one thing that I want to do is I want to be clear that we don't have all of the answers to all of the questions at this point. Some of the studies that we have are still ongoing, and until these studies are complete, our evaluations are concluded, we will not be able to answer all of the questions. I understand the City of Kamloops and many Kamloops residents are anxious and have been waiting for answers for a long time. It is not our intent to withhold or delay any information. Instead, we are determined to present you with the most thorough, accurate, and complete material when it becomes available. So today I would like to introduce two gentlemen that will be happy to answer some questions for you with respect to the answers that we have provided to the City of Kamloops. To my left is Mr. Dan Ferreter. Mr. Ferreter is the Vice President Environmental for KGHM International. And to the far left is Mr. Bill Madison. Mr. Madison is a Project Development Manager for the Ajax project. Combined, these gentlemen have about 60 years of mining experience. So at this point, we'd be happy to have these gentlemen answer any of your questions.
Dan, you went there, I think there was about 17 questions here, 18 total.
Maybe about
11
yeah.
questions.
I'm just looking at most of them, Dan. Most of them, I think roughly 75% of them are, as Eve said, we're working on it, can't provide enough information. Could you have provided, is it still early to provide about 75% of those? I mean, the health impact, stuff like that has to be delayed, but I'm just wondering what the reason is.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a good question. It is still early in the process. So, the thing that we have to do in this process is honor the process. And what goes on in environmental assessment is, early on there's a lot of baseline studies. These are scientific studies that evaluate the site and all the different types of activities that will go on and potential impacts. And we're still in that process, so we're wrapping up our baseline studies. And now we're into the next phase of the process where we actually start to develop air models, water models, and then when those activities are done, they feed into the human health and ecological risk assessment. And really that's sort of the final piece of the EA, but we're still working on that, and our goal is to submit that in September. After we do submit that, there is a public comment period to review the EA. So, that is going to take place. And we do, like I said, that's kind of a government administered process, and we do have to follow and honor that process. Now, because we know that the community's had a lot of questions, we have decided to have some workshops in the summertime. So we're projecting maybe 6 to 8 workshops to try to answer what we can. There'll still be things that come out in the EA that won't really be revealed until September, and they'll be more thoroughly discussed during the public comment period after that. But what we want to do to satisfy people's requests and information is have some of these workshops to at least discuss what we can at that point. So, like I said, 6 to 8 workshops, June to July timeframe, and then submittal of the EA in September.
Dan, sorry, going through them, the questions that there were responses to were the diversion of Peterson Creek, the buffering for sound, and the blasting, which I think you can probably address in a little more detail. Can you wrap up what impact you think blasting is contained in this report? Yeah,
I mean, the details and the numbers that are in this report are is what you can read and see. But what we feel like the blasting is we believe it'll have a negligible impact. You have to realize that when we do blasting, that we too have to build facilities that can withstand any blast in that area. So blasting is something that we can definitely control. We can control the size of the blast. But when you look at a typical blast that we're going to have, and then how that's kind of mitigated through the ground, we don't anticipate any adverse impact on the community from our blasting.
Okay, so
Dan, there's been some sort of criticism of the test blasting you've done so far from people who are opposed to the mine. Could you touch on a little bit how you've modeled it?
Yeah, and what I also want to point out about the blasting is as I had said earlier, this process really is not finished. So we're trying to provide as much information as we can early and still honor the EA. But but even with the blasting, when all that analysis kind of comes together and is finalized, then we have to sit and evaluate it. And if there's any sort of mitigation that's required, that will be part of our EA submittal. So if we saw something in blasting, you know, when we got to the final stage of that, because the blasting too will feed into the human health and ecological risk assessment. If we saw that there was going to be an adverse impact from the blasting, then we would have to devise some mitigation to offset that. But remember, blasting is something that we can definitely control. And blasting is something that we often will alter at our mining operations. If we have issues with slope stability and we feel like the blasting is too strong, we can definitely change that. So it's something that's very much in our control, and it's something that we often do at our other mines.
Yeah. Dan, Vancouver has a 9 o'clock gun. Are people in downtown Kamloops or whatever, what will their susceptibility be to blasting? I mean, at 12 o'clock, will they hear a big boom? Or I'm just wondering, you know, the average person working downtown, what would the impact, or how loud?
I think it would be very, very negligible. I don't think that you would hear it if you were downtown.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't anticipate it because it's over the ridge.
The information that is in the report, there's some spots where there is some detail about Peterson Creek and stuff like that. It's not cited what the sources are. There's also some reference to, I think Jacko Lake, previous reports on that. That there was no complaints and such on the impact on Jacko Lake. However, the operation back then was very different than what this operation is. So can you tell me a little bit about the studies that have been done and where this information that's in this report is sourced from?
Yeah, I mean, so what we have done is we've completed the baseline groundwater work in that area. The groundwater model is still under review, so we have not completed the groundwater model yet. But that's the next activity that we have. And like I said earlier, you know, you kind of have to think about this process on those three components. You have your baseline studies to evaluate what are the current conditions, and then you do your modeling to determine, well, what would the impact of our mining operation be on those conditions? And then when you're done with that phase, the final component is there some mitigation here that we need to do? And really the second two phases of that are not totally complete yet for either Jacko Lake or for Peterson Creek. So, you know, that still will be determined, and when we submit our EA, it'll explain what we intend to do with those two issues.
Can you respond to declining property values vis-a-vis where the power line's going to be? And I know a lot of the residents up in Aberdeen and future development are concerned that their property values could go down. And here you sort of intimate that you don't believe that's true. Can you explain?
Yes, and you know, so there's another important component to the EA, and it's very important, and that's the socioeconomic impact. So, you know, we will be doing a socioeconomic impact study, and of course that will also discuss property values. It's not complete at this time. When that is complete, it will be part of the submittal.
Is it possible that you can't predict future trends? Is it actually possible within any reason to predict if property values are going to drop?
Yeah, I really can't answer that question. I'm not sure. I don't know how that would be done.
Okay.
So I think that's a good question, and I agree with you. It's pretty tough to understand completely, but we do have experts that work in that field, and what they're doing right now is they're compiling sort of the raw numbers with the mine, you know, employment numbers, spin-off jobs, and then they'll be working with BC Stats. So that process is still ongoing. So our socioeconomic study, you know, is not complete. Another thing that's part of that study is there is a lot of consultation with the community on that.
Okay. Rerouting Peterson Creek and the impact on fish and wildlife, can you take us from the genesis of that and how you see it impacting or not impacting fish and wildlife?
Like I said,
well, I mean, just sort of tell us what's in there. There's sort of some detail.
There is some detail, but like I said earlier, that really, you know, the final outcome of that will be in our EA, because we have to evaluate that as a complete package, and then like I said, we also need to evaluate an appropriate mitigation. I mean, we certainly want to propose a project that is safe for the community. You know, our company has some core values, which you can see. The core values are listed back here. But I would say that, you know, if you went to any of our operations, the main core value that people gel around is zero harm. And once again, even in a project like this that we're permitting, what we want to do is develop and permit and mine and operate an operation that has minimal effect
Dan,
on
I
the
mean,
surrounding community and environment.
with respect to the opponents of the mine, do you think the fact that close to 60 or 70% of the questions aren't answered at this point will satisfy them? Or will this, you know, this sort of satisfy council as well, because there's still a lot of...
Well, it's our intent, you know, we hope that it does, and then like I said, we also plan to have the workshops. I mean, you know, what we're trying to do is provide some satisfaction there. We're trying to be transparent, as Yves had stated earlier, and at the same time honor the government administered EA process. So the norm would be that you would submit an EA and have a public comment period, and then we'd all sit down and hash through this. We know that the community would like to get as much information as they can prior to that, so that's what we're trying to do by answering this letter. And then by hosting, we're hoping that when we have these 6 to 8 workshops, we don't have it totally nailed down yet, but when we have those workshops in the summer, we can answer questions, you know, some more questions, but there'll still be some of the information that will not come out until the EA.
Building from Angela's question, it's been almost 2 years since council posed the questions. But it's only, 4 or 5 months until a lot of the information you're saying is going to come out in September.
Right.
Can you tell me about the timing of putting these responses out now when, as Angela said, majority of them we're working on it?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the timing for us is KGHM International took this project over in September. I think everyone's aware of that. And when we took that project over, you know, we've diligently formed a team here. We've hired a lot of local people, and we've also hired several consultants to help us finish this project. So, you know, that's really the time period that I would mainly want to comment on is, you know, we've taken the project over in September. We are very aggressively working on submitting this EA application. We have dozens of consultants helping us with this. We have 6 people here working full time on it. So it's, you know, it's very important to us, and we're working very hard on trying to submit this in September. It's a pretty aggressive target, but that's really all I would want to comment on is, you know, we started it in September, and we're taking this project very seriously. It's very important to us, and we're pushing on it very hard to try to meet that application deadline.
As far as the workshops go, are you expecting that there will be more information than what's in this letter by the time you have those, or it will be pretty
Yeah,
simple?
and you know, let me talk a little bit about what we've done so far, where we plan to go next, and then the EA submission. So, you know, I think you remember back in January we had the open house, and what the open house was really intended to do was introduce our company to the community. You know, who is this KGHMI and what do they do? And what we wanted to explain to folks was we have several mines that are in this sort of same situation. We mine next to other communities in other parts of the world, and we do that successfully. So that's really what we wanted to do in January, was not specifically talk about Ajax, just talk about who we are and how we operate in other parts of the world. And then what we hope to do with the workshops is, like I have stated previously, is provide a little bit of additional information. You know, what will the mine be like? You know, how does mining activity take place at this site? And then for some of the bigger issues, well, how is dust generated at a mine like this? And then how would we control dust in a mine like this? That's what the workshops are intended to do, is you know, provide some more detail. It's still a little bit higher level, but provide some more specific detail about this operation. This is what this operation would look like. This is what we think are some of the higher level issues.